I'm going to do a weird standing up and sitting down thing and then walking off, so just to warn you. Shmai Prinhanda, welcome back this afternoon. My name is Shirish Kulkarni, and I'm a journalist, researcher, and community organiser, and I founded something called Inclusive Journalism Cymru, which does what it says on the tin. So my work focuses pretty much exclusively now on building a more inclusive journalism sector that truly reflects all the people and communities of Wales. So when I reread this intro just now before I came on, I realised that when I wrote it, I was probably either tired, hangry, or drunk, or probably all three, because I realised I've been pretty direct about what I think the problem is in our industry. But, sod it, we have had enough of A, taking this, and B, being polite about it. It is time for real talk on this. So, we all know there's a crisis in journalism. There's been a breakdown of the business model, and there's been a breakdown of trust, and those two things are not unrelated. As Michael put it so well this morning, that is down to who holds the power and who tells the stories. Now, this industry talks a good game when it comes to being diverse, inclusive, and representative. But it is pretty dreadful when it comes to actually doing anything which actually advances any of those goals. And that's because the people running the industry are largely people for whom the system works just fine as it is. That is mostly white, straight, cis, male, metropolitan, middle-aged. You get where I'm going with this. But it's worth remembering that that group of people actually represents a tiny proportion of the population. But they get to decide what the stories that are told, by whom, and to whom. It's impossible for their stories to accurately reflect or even really understand the true richness of society, but yet they claim to. If we let them, they will preside over the death of journalism, what I call suicide by business as usual. So we're not going to let them. We're going to reclaim journalism for all of us. So, as part of that, as part of a cross-disciplinary process, which we did, a collaboration between GALWAD, the Bureau of Investigative Journalism, and the Solutions Journalism Network, we set out to tell different stories with different people and imagine a different future, building what we call the People's Newsroom Initiative. So we worked with a group of people from all over Wales to support them to tell their stories, explore their experiences, and the big questions facing Wales in 2022. And crucially, also investigating what the solutions to those big questions might be. So to tell you more about that, I'm delighted to welcome two of the brilliant participants in our GALWAD People's Newsroom project, Bethany Handley and Shakira Morka, who are going to tell us about their vision of why and how we can build a better, more inclusive, and more sustainable journalism for all of us. Beth and Shakira.
Thank you, Shirish. I'm Shakira Morka, a writer, second-year uni student, and GALWAD Young Company member.
I'm Bethany Handley, a writer, GALWAD Young Company member, and the Communications Officer at Diverse Cymru.
And today we're going to outline the problems with current journalism, focusing on how journalism often doesn't represent diverse communities, the solutions for this, including community and persons-focused solution journalism, before looking at what's next. So what are the problems?
Legacy journalism lacks diversity in the storytellers, the stories that are told, but also how they're told. Journalism doesn't just speak for and over communities, it silences them. This forced silencing perpetuates the lack of diversity in journalism. If stories are not told by and with communities and represent communities, communities will not share their stories or consume mainstream media. Consequently, many issues that impact on communities go unreported. For example, in the last year in Wales, there has been a 35% increase in the number of hate crimes reported, yet this isn't reflected in the media. Where are the stories about the impact of hate crimes on marginalised communities? How can we reduce the prevalence of hate crime when the human cost is not reported and the stories of marginalised communities go unheard? Journalism that speaks for, not with communities, continues to marginalise communities rather than being in service to them.
Traditional media is perhaps most damaging to those from intersectional minority identities. As a black disabled woman, the experiences of neurotypical white men who have dominated traditional journalism are directly oppositional to mine. This lack of representation within who controls the media has an impact on which stories are allowed to be told, and in turn misrepresents the true nature of community issues. To many, journalism has a strong focus on objectivity, but this is simply an outdated notion. How can stories that fail to even acknowledge the perspectives of marginalised groups ever live up to this? Statistics can be misrepresented and viewpoints can be misconstrued, leaving a media landscape which damages the most vulnerable in society. These misrepresented stories can lead to policies that reinforce existing power structures by perpetuating negative stereotypes and ideas to groups who do not have the resources to fight back. This also inevitably leads to a lack of trust in media and journalism.
Trust is earned. Inevitably, if you don't see storytellers that represent you, speaking with stories that speak to you, you're not going to trust in journalism. But journalism doesn't exist in isolation to the rest of society. A breakdown in trust in journalism leads to a breakdown in trust in institutions. If people don't feel represented in the media, they may not engage in politics. The lack of diversity in legacy journalism decreases community engagement with journalism, but also with democracy, diminishing civic engagement and leading to policies that protect and reinforce existing power structures. Here are some examples of narratives that continue to reinforce harmful stereotypes, alienate communities, and perpetuate existing power structures. From mismatched same-sex couples to the show's first contestant with dwarfism, it's clear producers value inclusion over entertainment. Inspirational blind boy walks 13 miles for charity. The EastEnders actress overcame her disability to perform. By discussing disabled people as only permitted to participate as tick-box inclusion exercises and maintaining the harmful narrative that disabled people must either overcome their disability to have any worth or are inspirational objects of pity, we're further marginalising disabled people and reinforcing this forced silencing. And it's not just the disabled community that are experiencing this. So what are the solutions?
We need journalists from underrepresented backgrounds to consult communities, to know what stories they want to tell. Inclusion means ensuring that everyone feels a sense of belonging, that people feel heard, seen and valued. To provide work experience and placements for people from these backgrounds or to interview them is simply box ticking and is not inclusive if the nature of journalism itself doesn't change and if we fail to rip apart harmful stereotypes and consult communities. Inclusion means truly valuing the contributions, perspectives and lived experience of marginalised people and allowing us to take up paid roles. We must also build trust by showing up for people, being embedded and contributing to healthy communities, as journalism should support and nurture communities, not interrogate and undermine them. Working with People's Newsroom has opened me up to the potential future of journalism, which is created by the majority instead of a small number of elites. My article, Unseen, Young Black and Welsh, documents my experience in the Welsh language education system and how, in my experience, it seems to prioritise the needs of its white students. When writing, I didn't feel like I needed to censor myself and my lived experience, which is rare for marginalised people. This opportunity also gave me access to connections which are generally inaccessible to those outside the industry. When choosing my article topic, I could have never predicted having the chance to talk to Professor Charlotte Williams, who is working to change the curriculum to include Black history. Giving underrepresented people the opportunity and resources to write allows us to create solutions and provide a meaningful service to those within our community.
We need new forms of storytelling that provide a service to and with people and communities, and that identify and interrogate systems of power. Before we interrogate an issue, we must first examine the systems, from social norms to law, and ask, what are the underlying assumptions and attitudes that maintain the system? What power dynamics are maintaining the system? What policies are interconnected? Who is benefiting from the system and who is being harmed? Through asking these questions, we begin to hold the entire system to account and not just parts of it.
To provide a service for and with people and communities, we must also move towards solutions journalism. Solutions journalism doesn't just identify problems, but examines solutions. Solutions journalism challenges the assumption that only problems and not solutions are newsworthy by examining the strengths and limitations of potential solutions. It gives hope and helps communities identify how to achieve change, rather than divisive journalism that harms communities. Solutions journalism reminds communities that the power is in our hands. So, what's next? Through people-centered storytelling that moves beyond notions of objectivity, journalism can help build community power through information and action.
We need solutions journalism that examines and challenges systems of power, working with communities to amplify voices. We need journalism that doesn't further marginalise and harm communities, but builds trust and welcomes communities in, for no community is hard to reach. Thank you.
Deal.